Welcome back. This is Mark Silver. I'm continuing in the series of videos I'm doing based on my book, Borderline Personality Disorder, Survival Guide from Chaos to Authenticity. Today we're looking at the next criteria of a borderline personality disorder in the DSM, which is current suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, or self-mutilating behaviors. Suicidal behavior and gestures or threats of self-mutilating behavior may or may not be related to one another. It's a rather complex subject. Suicide is really a subtopic under the general rubric of self-harm or self-injury. It seems that the large majority of people who engage in self-harm have no intention to end their lives or even to try to end their lives. Harmful behavior can be wide-ranging, including chronic drug abuse, high-speed driving, dangerous or self-risk hobbies, or self-destructive tendencies. Of those people who contemplate suicide, relatively few will ever attempt or even follow through, although the single greatest indicator of a completed suicide is someone who has previously attempted suicide. It is not uncommon for people who consider existential questions to also consider the merits of suicide, and yet very few seriously consider ending their lives. Thus, it is important to differentiate between fantasy or existential considerations and true suicidal ideation, which is associated with real clinical issues, although the two may overlap. Suicide is extremely complicated because people kill themselves for different reasons, under different circumstances, with different mental health issues, and even with different tools, and geography, culture, and gender also play important roles. There are certain people who kill themselves accidentally, such as an accidental overdose, and others who behave in such a consistently self-destructive or dangerous manner that the likelihood of dying is substantially higher than normal, or perhaps even inevitable, and with rock climbers who do not use gear to secure their safety as probably a really obvious example. Suicidality may either be active or passive. Active suicidality concerns when a person has a plan to end his own life, such as by a clear overdose of medications or even street drugs. Active suicidality is characterized most often by deep psychological pain or despair and a hopeless sense and a hopeless belief that nothing in the person's life can improve in a meaningful way. In contrast, passive suicidality concerns thoughts of death or dying that may include the person stating that he wonders what it would be like if he never had to wake up, so he would sleep and sleep and sleep, so that his pain would vanish. Thus, passive suicidality is usually more ideational, while active suicidality is often accompanied by a thought-out plan or impulsive behavior that may or may not be realistic or even coherent. As such, some people calculate what behavior will eliminate pain, short-term and long-term. That's very important. I want to repeat that. As a result, some people will actually make a calculation of what behaviors will eliminate pain short-term and long-term. This may sound odd to some people or anyone who has not experienced overwhelming psychological or physical pain, but when pain levels are chronically high, all hope seems lost and personal meaning and personal dignity become extremely difficult to maintain. I believe that the healthcare system and physicians has an obligation to minimize pain, and when pain is chronic and overwhelming and multiple interventions have been utilized without success to alleviate the pain, the person should be allowed to end his life rather than contend with endless suffering. While suicide is generally rooted in hopeless feelings of despair, with deep psychological pain, often associated with clinical depression, borderlines first and foremost are disappointed in themselves and the beliefs that their own behaviors, emotion, and thinking is awful and repetitive. Self-cutting, which is not uncommon among borderlines, is sometimes viewed in the same category as recurrent suicidal behavior, but the reality is that it probably exists as a separate phenomenon, even though cutting can lead to death if the cuts are deep enough and the wounds are placed in water to prevent blood clotting. Borderlines often make gestures, threats, or engage in self-harm behavior for years, without ever being admitted to inpatient hospitalization because their behaviors are not immediately life-threatening or even seem benign, particularly when it involves superficial cutting on the forearm or thighs. Self-harm can have both an objective and a subjective component. For some people, tattoos are a form of mutilation, but for many, tattoos are a form of art that allows for positive self-expression and even beautification. For some people, drugs serve as a gateway to mind enhancement, and for others, drugs serve objectively as a form of physical harm. Clearly, anyone who associates the word recreational with drugs does not consider drugs especially harmful. My wife bought me a pain mat that has plastic needles, and sometimes I fall asleep on it, waking up with redness and even puncture marks a little bit. Lying on the pain mat distributes pain in the body more evenly. It may even block specific pain areas, and it is thought that the pressure from these plastic needles stimulates the muscles, releasing endorphins and tension, allowing for better circulation and even neurological functioning. While I subjectively find my wife's gift relaxing, some people may view the result as unnecessary bodily harm, especially if over-the-counter sleep aids, for example, or calming music are equally effective to induce sleep. For borderlines, threats of self-harm and self-mutilating gestures regulate emotions, alleviate feelings of emptiness, or provide relief against self-hatred. It may allow for personal control, it may serve as a way to punish oneself for perceived wrongdoing, or it may serve to gain attention or to simply feel something. Many borderlines would just as soon be dead unless someone can affirm their need to remain alive. So deep is their need for human recognition of their psychological and emotional issues. What's most clear is that this category pertains directly to affective instability due to marked reactivity of mood, and that's going to be the next category that we investigate on the upcoming video.